Alright, it's time for a sketchbook day. Before I start any of my major drawings, whether it be with pastels or pencils or pen or whatever, I wanted to take a minute to show you some of my sketchbook. I have a couple things I've been working on. One of them is my comic that my sister keeps telling me I need to actually publish. So I will, I guess. I'm just going to show you a few of the characters, which is mostly what's in this book, along with a couple of fun time ones. I thought I fixed the focusing problem last time. Dumb. You are a dumb. Stop being a dumb. Okay. There we go. I always seem to leave the first page blank. Now this was one that I did just thinking about the more, have you ever seen Da Vinci's Dragon? He's got several different sketchbook pictures that are of dragons of the more Chinese variety. And this was one that I based on one of my favorite ones from when I was younger, and I decided to go a little bit more in detail, so I went through and made it somewhere between scales and feathers, and gave it a mane down the end, just doing a headshot for the most part. I also, this one, this page, it also exists. It's got my, this one is a tabaxi for a friend's D&D campaign, and she commissioned me to make her Black Panther tabaxi with a earring obsession. So I put in tons and tons of, let's move this. I just wanna borrow this. We've got all of her little earrings just kind of set up there. Gave her a few potions on the belt, and of course her swords. Like I said, this page is more of the practicing. I went through Google and stuff and started sketching panthers so that I got a good face of what the face should look like on a panther. And gave her a swirl coat, and then gave it a nice dark line to show the movement there, trying to get it to all work together. Alright, now this is straight out of the Coconut Vampires comic. This is Jason Draxon, son of Dracula, and these are his best friends. No one's 100% sure whether she's legitimately a Japanese Oni or not, but she is best friends with the girl who cannot be girly, no matter how hard she tries. And these three make up a squad, along with the occasional tag-along of their friend Willow, who is a dryad. Yeah, there you go. There's Willow right there in her full Arabian Night princess outfit. Meanwhile, Drac tried to play the superhero, but he gets a little possessive over his candy. And then, there we go, there's his obsession. This is somebody just took all of the chocolate. Right, and then, yeah, this one was just me playing around trying to figure out multiverses by going through multiple types of different world mythologies. If you go through different things, you've got different belief systems from all throughout the world that believe in, well, essentially multiverses. You've got multiple places to go, either when you're dead or when you are changing, shifting, going into your, you know, more classic call to adventure type story. You've got the 9 realms of Yarsigul from the Norse legends. You've got the 3 different levels from most Christian belief systems, and you've got the several different layers from both Aztec and Mesopotamian beliefs, as well as the more lotus-like seat of Brahman from some of the Hindu philosophies. And so I kind of put them all together. Oh, and then of course there's several different African beliefs where it's the world as a turtle. Discworld, of course, played with that concept with literally making a flat world on a turtle, but I played with the idea that if you put those all together, you make something a little bit interesting. So you've got a large main universe with a single body, and then you've got 4 outer areas that can look like both a flower and a turtle, like a turtle that's just kind of wrapped up on itself. And it's also, if it's all together, that ends up being 9, with the 1 in the middle, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 on the top, with a single connecting point, which would be that connecting Yarsigul ascension point. It's been interesting trying to figure this out. I've been using this as the basic backstory for the story I've been writing with my character Charlie Bayard. She's fun. This one was just me trying now doing a grizzly bear. I wasn't as happy with how I shaded this one, even though it was really fun to draw. I just couldn't get access to my darker pencils, so I ended up doing something with just the 2B, 2HB. I was at class. There we go. But I think he looks okay. Oh, and this one was fun. This one was a little bit more D&D invested. I was drawing a little gnome raiding a cave of dragons, but not realizing that the dragon itself is posing as its horde. And Mama comes home and he's not so happy. Not so happy. What do you think, Esther? Look happy? No, not so happy. This one I did for a family member. It's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, mostly 80s style. Obviously, I'm not actually sure. I haven't seen the whole 80s version. I did a lot more with the 90s version and the 2019 3D action one. But this guy's one of my favorite characters in the 90s Turtles, so I drew him in there. Got him, Shredder, we've got all 4 turtles aiming for pizza, and yes, I did pose this after Da Vinci's Last Supper. Because, why not? If you can't parody classical pieces of work, then what you gonna do? Oh, and the final product from that Session 0 video that I did the other day. Now, this is not a very full sketchbook, which is why I will soon be going into doing some proper drawing. Okay, and this is gonna shift let. Okay, I think I got the, dang it. Eventually I'll get the focus to calm the heck down, but in the meantime, I'm going to start off with just a basic scene of my 2 main characters for the coconut vampires. Now, the basic idea behind this series came from a Tumblr post that said that coconut water, the water inside of coconuts when you break them open, is pure enough to be used as a blood transfusion. Now, I don't know whether that's true or not. I haven't been able to see any sources to the true or to the contrary, but that amused the heck out of me, and all I imagined was a whole set of vampires from Hawaii who were just kind of a little bit different from the average because they didn't have to feed on human blood. I actually ended up brainstorming this one with my brother, which was really fun, and we figured out that if you had the coconut as a option because of its purity. You obviously would have a little few things that were very different from the average vampire. First of all, when you get the average vampire, they kind of tend to have some of the stranger weaknesses. For example, a classic Strogi type vampire is going to be vulnerable to salt being chucked over the shoulder because they are forced to want to sit down and count it, and they're hyper intelligent, so it's supposed to not take them super long, but it's one of the ways to delay them. And you've got the weakness to water and silver. Silver mostly because it's associated in legend with being basically made of pure light. That's what silver, especially in medieval times, represented. So we put down the idea that maybe it's not just like an unholiness that puts the vampires apart. Maybe it's that they are hyper sensitive to more electric stuff, which would also explain the problem with water, because they've got more of a sensitivity. Water's, especially running water, is supposed to make a vampire immobile. So maybe that's a electric sensitivity. Eventually, it ended up boiling down to what is weird about vampires is that they take on a weakness that is a exaggerated form of what they feed on. So for vampires, like a human, they can get sunburned, but instead of just getting sunburned, they get roasted. And like humans, they can run fast and for a really long time because humans are endurance. We are endurance predators. And we have that ability, so the vampire is able to do that faster. But we also get all... there we go. The potential to get OCD or get ADHD, and so that was applied to these vampires in the vampires of this comic, in that vampires are essentially an exaggeration of either what they were in life or what they like becomes a full-on obsession. So for example, with the Jason, who I showed you earlier, his obsession is with sweets and candy, and you try to take that away from him and you're going to have some problems. As opposed to his father, Dracula, who has some of the more classic vampire weaknesses, because he is the more classic vampire built and bred in Transylvania, as in the just post-plague times, essentially. Oh, there we go. So he has a collection of different, not grains of sand or grains of salt, but he has a collection of different types of, actually he does have salt, sand, rice, and a couple other small things that he has collections of. Dracula has some sand from the Hawaiian Islands, from one of the times that he, visited that colony, although he was in full I have the sun hat regalia at the time. And he has rice from all across the world, all different types, in little jars, of which he has counted every bit of rice within. And he has a couple different, oh dear, this angle's a little bit weird. Let's fix that. There we go. There we go. All right. Now, why on earth is it? Stop! Stop that! Focus! My goodness. Okay, One of my favorite characters to draw within the comic is actually these two's dad. This is my main protagonists. They are, oh my gosh, Kai and yeah. And gosh, I don't have the full names memorized. I did a lot more research trying to do my best to give them some nice proper Hawaiian names, but I've got their shortened names memorized more since that's more what they use whenever I'm drawing them and whenever I'm writing their story as they go on. So Kai and Sia are descended from the kids of Kevin, who is a coconut vampire from Hawaii who did some traveling through Europe when he was younger. Him and his friend and mentor. Now, one of the things that differs between my vampires from Europe and my Hawaiian vampires is that because of how the Hawaiian vampires feed, how it's not on blood but on coconuts instead, they have some very different things associated with them. So a classic vampire-ologist or whatever wouldn't be able to spot them as just a normal vampire because they don't have, obviously, a problem with the sun. Coconuts are not one of the strange fruits that are able to sunburn. They are actually mildly SPF resistant, and they are rather nutritious. Indeed, really nutritious. So these kids growing up are not the antithesis, but they are a very strange vampire to someone who knows the average lore. They have no weakness against water, partially because, well, if you grow up on an island, what you gonna do? And partially because of their mother, who is actually a mermaid. Or, well, used to be a mermaid. That's a long story. But the way that vampires are made within this comic, essentially, is that they lose their base elemental component. So a human, it loses their component of spirit, which is why a lot of the myths and legends say they lose their soul. It's because they lose their connection to spirit. A human's connection to spirit is also part of why vampires need to be invited into a house, because having a spiritual element makes it so that there's a barrier if a creature of spiritual alignment or element stay in a place for too long. It's one of the things that creates the more holy or sacred spaces within this is those with a spiritual element. Now, unfortunately for those who drink human blood, that does mean that they become, obviously, more affected by the spiritual, and they give themselves their own weaknesses, because humans are spirit elements. They can be changed and affected by the elementals, and because of such, that means that things that represent the element in its purest form can be painful. Kind of like why there are problems with crosses for a lot of the more European vampires, why you hang out garlic and that because of its belief as a spiritually purifying plant, and why you have garlands and such, and clove, and the different types that tend to be more spiritually aligned plants. Those are the ones that end up being more effective against your classic vampires. But again, as I said, these guys don't feed on humans as the average vampire would. These guys instead have very different weaknesses because of that. They've got a hint of mischief like their father, and they've got a side of, just a hint of a side of mad science from their mother, but they haven't got anything super telling other than obviously their obsession, which is still a thing. Any creature that has the void within them in any shape has some sort of effect because of it, and you are a vampire if you've got that obsession element. Strom in his Hawaiian shirt. Now, these two are twins, obviously fraternal, but they are alike in many ways, but they have some very different ways that they react to things. Kai has a lot more of the mischief than Tia does. Oops. Did I say Sia earlier? Tia. My goodness. Let's make sure that that's visible on the camera. Tia and Kai. Got it? Got it. Good. Okay. These two are just exiting their middle school age, so they've still got a little bit of that like baby fat there on them, which is not a bad thing. Baby fat is normal, but they've got just a hint of a pudge around the edges, and that's kind of fun to draw, frankly. But as they go along, they are headed elsewhere. In the comic, their dad makes a mistake that gets him kicked out of Hawaii. This shouldn't be spoilers since it's like the first page, but they end up moving, which is how they end up meeting everybody else, including my favorite character, Nathan, who is the notagonist. He displays many of the classic shonen type protagonist, or, well, shoujo, I guess, anime protagonist stereotypes, such as always sitting at the back window during class, dramatically, staring longingly out as if he has something to see. He's the one who's there for his friends, and he's always checking things out, but he always ends up missing the main action somehow, whether by coincidence or by some circumvention. But either way, these two end up having a lot of fun with him, as he is adamant that they are most definitely vampires, and nobody believes him because they obviously have none of the traits whatsoever that would portray a vampire of any type. They are disgusted by the idea of drinking blood. They are kind of mildly horrified when people say they want to stay inside because there's sun out, because they grew up in Hawaii, and if you want to stay inside when there's sun out, why? It's sun. It's good for you. And so that pretty much proves it to the majority of the classroom body, but poor Nathan has got his plot armor and his uncanny knowledge that he is never believed by. Unfortunately, I have figured out what his heritage is, which amuses the crap out of me, and I don't think it's super spoilersy because it's not like a big reveal, but Nathan is a descendant of Cassandra of Delphi, who was the priestess who was given true visions, but also cursed to never be believed. So Nathan has a history of a long line of people who are prophets of some sort that are never truly believed. Prophets seen, and those who can see the future, and people who have knowledge about those around them insightfully, but nobody ever believes him because why would they? He's just Nathan. There we go. Probably jeans for these guys. Could give Tia a dress, but I just don't think that that's fits her that much. I mean, I don't know what the school dress code will let her get away with it, but she's gonna try. Technically, the dress code says that exactly what you've got to wear, but while it says some vague ideas for girls and guys, she's like, I'm not having dumb dresses, because you know what dresses do? They make it so you can't climb trees, and climbing trees is paramount. So she ends up being in her polo shirts a lot more than anyone else. Well, Kai tries to get away with his Hawaiian shirts, claiming that it's the right color of blue, and you definitely have white in your school theme colors, so why on earth would there be any problem with having floral patterns or patterns with birds on them? Birds are a little bit more entertaining with him because that was a weird sentence. He enjoys having his shirts have birds on them a lot more than just the normal floral patterns. He is honestly one of the vampires that is mad that flight is not one of their main attributes. There are vampire types, if they feed on their certain creatures or elements that can fly a little bit easier. Like at one point Dracula fed primarily on storm elements, and he was able to do thunder and the like, but he hasn't been feeding on those lately, so he has a harder time doing that type of quote-unquote magic. So Yeah. Now, Tia and Kai are probably the best at trying to pretend that they're average that they possibly can. They get blindsided by a few things. They end up moving to the mainland. I put them somewhere in Oregon so they can still have a coast and have some more trees. They have a little bit of getting used to when it comes to having shore on one side and trees on the other. But they slowly find their way through as the school year goes on and as hijinks ensue with everybody. They find out slowly who is who and who is what as the year goes on, as the school that they go to is not your average human high school. It is a Slayer Academy for slaying void creatures, of which vampires are usually considered one of the most dangerous. Ironically, one of their teachers is a vampire, one of my favorites, and he is just one of those guys that just doesn't give a crap. He just has no chill. He has no chill whatsoever. Let's see. Maybe I should give her some better sandals, but I'm just throwing some flip-flops on her at the moment. There you go. How you doing, Tia? Alright, and Kai, in the meantime, they end up having several classes that are exactly the same, and at first they are following similar pursuits, and over time, obviously, they are still separate people. They find that they've got slightly different interests. Obviously, they already knew about Kai's obsession. Their obsessions are kind of entertaining. Kai is obsessed with salt and different types of salts and different grains of salt and how fascinating they all are. Sodium chlorides, potassium chlorides, all the basic neutral compounds are just absolutely enthralling to him. So he has a lot more of a chemistry bent than his sister, whereas Tia is a lot more fascinated with water and just H2O itself and how it functions, not just as a liquid, but as a solid, and honestly wants to do some Arctic exploration, as well as try and figure out what she can do to help environments thrive better, especially ones that rely on water, like the swamps and watersheds. She's got a bit more of a bent towards I want to say bent towards academics than Kai, but that's not quite true. Both of them are heavily invested when it's interesting to them. And when it's not, they have a slightly different reaction. When Kai's not invested in something, he starts basically just doing what he wants to anyway, and doing the whole stick it to the man, whereas Tia tends to be the, if they're going to try and teach me something boring, then I'm going to show them that it's boring, and so she basically will take the project to the umpteenth level. If she has a science project and they're trying to do something about just the basics of ice or biochemistry or whatever types she is doing at the time, she takes the experiment to the next level. If that means making a hydrogen-oxygen compound, she makes the hydrogen-oxygen compound and then she sets fire to it. And if they're making a more, let's make that arm look bent like it's supposed to be. There we go. If they're making something a little bit more placid, like doing one of those ones where you're freezing ice and checking the telemetry is not the right word, checking the density, there we go. My goodness, my words are not always up to functioning when I am drawing sometimes. It feels like I turn that part of my brain off a little bit when I start drawing. But when she, oh my gosh, that looks disgusting. When she starts actually working on something, you know that it's going to be interesting by the time it is done. Whether that interesting means something explodes or she proves her point by making it work, she will figure out how to prove her point. Tia really doesn't like being wrong, whereas Kai doesn't like, oh dear, being bored. Tia will go out of her way to prove that either she is right or that you are, well, not that you are wrong. Kai will tease the crap out of you if you are wrong, but he's not going to tell you you are a worse person for it. He's just going to, especially with Tia, is going to tease her when she's wrong, and Tia has a notebook count of exactly how many times she's actually been wrong. Honestly, them growing up together and him constantly doing that is probably part of why she always wants to prove herself right, because she is never wrong. And put that in quotation marks. Again, I'm not sure how well that comes through on the video, but I'll do a close-up later. So she's never wrong. Kai, on the other hand, is brasher. He is brash and somewhat impetuous, as opposed to Tia, who is brash and impetuous. Whereas Tia is generally a little bit more, I'll prove it, with that more Cheshire grin. It's one of the more interesting things to do. Also, Tia is very much a I will do it for science, whereas her brother is the I'll do it because it's funny. And he will do something just because it's funny to him. Brash and impetuous because it's funny, and sometimes Kai tries not to, but sometimes he goes too far in his teasing, and sometimes he goes too far and ends up mocking. But he is better at apologizing if he does. Whereas Tia will push until she proves that she is right. And if she is proven wrong, then she will cede the point. and acknowledge victory, because for her it is all a challenge. But if she feels that someone is incorrectly telling her she's wrong, she is a fury. Kai has a, I don't know, general mischief to him, which I've already kind of gone over. These guys end up going on a lot of adventures and figuring out a lot of different ways that things function. They run their way through the mythical world, and they end up on a quest or two, and in the meantime they're going to school and learning all about the world that they find themselves in, because the world is a different place than you think. There are vampires who are accountants because of the whole needing to count things. There are harpies who are idols that do more than just put on makeup when they get on stage, when they're getting ready to get on stage. And there are vampires who are running around causing havoc as usual, but those ones are not the same as some of the ones that you would think of. Some of them are a lot less Strogie variety and a lot more tear people up and eat them rather than just drain their blood. People in general, especially after the whole Twilight debacle, tend to have a lot of a idea of vampires as these really pretty kind of perfect essence of human being that are shown both in the Vampire Diaries series, they're shown in the Twilight series. There are quite a few different areas that they just look at, and you get to a point where it's just annoying as a person who studies different legends, mythologies, etc., because I am a storyteller and I am slightly weirded out by some of the ways that we have romanticized vampires in general, because in the past, the ones that you might want to try to romanticize would be a lot more like the Fae, like the Tuatha De Danann types, like the fairies and elves and the mischief makers and the unearthly beauties and that, but there was that element of danger to that as well. And for some reason we've put that over to vampires as being a little bit less of a fairy tale, and have transferred that unearthly beauty of the Fae to the idea that we have culturally of vampires in our modern fiction. Now, if you go out into older fiction, you'll see that vampires are, well, massively varied. First of all, there are so many different types of things that we classify as vampires. We have the ones from Mexico, which are basically death harpies. I'm just gonna call them death harpies, but they are a woman who at night sheds her legs and flies off to go drink either the blood or the essence of small children, and then comes back home and puts her legs back on. It's bizarre. And there's the one that is more bat-like from, I think is it Vietnam? I could be wrong about this, but I think it's Vietnam, that it's a bat-like vampire spirit that will consume unwary travelers. It's like this Batman, well, man-bat vampire that just travels the jungles at night. And there's, of course, the difference between vampires and werewolves and that weirdness in our culture that I just don't understand, because, frankly, vampires and werewolves was never a thing. It was never a thing. Vampires and werewolves was a thing once, and that once was Twilight. Vampires have, throughout most legends, held a very different place than werewolves within the cultures that they either come from or the cultures that they build around them. Vampires are modernly considered to have more of a court, which is really funny because, again, there's that weird fae connection between them. And there's there we go, let's put in a couple lines there. But there's that pack mentality that they have with werewolves in most iterations that no one quite knows what to do with, except for every now and then someone gets it really cool, like the Mercy Thompson series by Patricia Briggs. Hashtag not sponsored, hashtag would like to be sponsored. Please come find me, Audible, please. But I really do enjoy series that I consider really well written, and frankly, the Patricia Briggs Mercy Thompson series is one of my favorite urban fantasies of all time. Right up there with one of my favorite fantasy authors, Brandon Sanderson, up there. But I have had a harder time finding stuff that I want to watch and want to read because of that, because I see quality sometimes and I see the way that the worlds are built and I just want more of it. And it's part of why I want to write, is because I want to make more of it, and I don't want my worlds to be heavy-handed or just obnoxious, so I want to make them right, even if the first little while ends up being a little bit more obnoxious as they go along. I want to get better as I go on. So there we go, that looks like some slightly faded out jeans. Let's give an inside line. Go. There she is. Alright, those are rolled up. Make them poof just a little bit. That one was badly rolled. But I feel like the whole Stephenie Meyer gets a lot of crap. I'm going to say that straight up. She probably doesn't deserve all of the crap, since there were some major things with publishers and such, and frankly, I don't think she's a bad writer. Twilight was a first novel, and I have read The Host multiple times, and all the things that annoyed me about Bella in the Twilight series were pulled off perfectly well in The Host, partially because it was literally an alien species. But it was interesting, and it showed me that she obviously knows how to write a story, and Twilight, despite its many flaws, still did motivate many people to write, if only because some people read it and made fan fiction, cough cough, not mentioning that, and some people read it and were so infuriated by the fact that this was published and had the thought, I can write better than this, that they decide to write something and prove that they can write better than this. I feel like the Twilight franchise has had a lasting impact on our culture, though not necessarily the one that people might think of. It's not just a impact of annoyance and hatred and interest into something that kind of mangles the legends and mythologies that it deals with. Let's not even talk about how she treats the tribe. No. Let's talk about how she treats the tribe in Twilight. I did some research, and she had a tenuous basis to base the werewolf myths on, to base the werewolf society on. Because that tribe in particular does have their legends that their origins come from wolves who became men. Part of that is because that whole region, where the Salish and the not Paiute, but that whole northwestern North America region has a consistent storytelling about a one or two people who came, called the Changers, or some variation of that came down, and when everything was all mixed around and just kind of everything was everything, and you are you, but you don't know if you're going to be a man, a wolf, or a tree the next day, and established, basically based on who each of the people were, established what they became and helped them stay that. They stayed trees, stayed wolves, stayed humans, stayed water, stayed everything. It's part of that whole you are connected to nature because literally nature is, it could have been you type idea, which is mangled in Disney's Pocahontas. But it's that idea that it is just fascinating that everything has that base of changeability is what I feel like got mangled within the Twilight verse especially. Okay, that's one of the many things that got mangled within the Twilight verse. So I decided with the Coconut Vampire comic to do something that's more based on my extensive study and research into different mythologies and different legends and different beliefs, and build something interesting and new from the ground up. And the novel that I'm working on, which is one of the first things that instead of just writing for 10 to 50 pages, I have just kept writing because I want to get it done, not just written down, is with Charlie Bayard. And it is basically started from a time that I ended up having the Twilight novel there during a very boring time. I picked it up because it was better than just sitting, so I read through the entire Twilight novel, and I remembered, one, my burning hatred for Bella's inner monologue, and two, that when the plot actually starts, there's a part of it that I actually liked. I like the basic romance, until the creepy stalker points, because the creepy stalker points annoy the crap out of me. But I like when that first moment of he hates her, he loves her, oh my gosh, hot and cold, that's so interesting to me. And she never really played up the demon eyes ever again, because at first it's like, oh, their eyes turn from gold to black because they haven't drunk blood. And that just ends up being something that I don't find fascinating, because surprisingly chisel-jawed vampires with amazingly ruffled appearances wasn't the put-off for me. I actually found that quite entertaining, and I kept having very different ideas of what Edward looked like in my head every time that he was described, because it felt like they never actually could decide how handsome he was, because he was just too handsome, with like dark circles under his eyes. Oh my gosh, he's like depressed handsome. Sparkle. So I read that series going, oh, this is kind of cool. And as a young girl, because I read this in middle school, at the height of the you hate it or you love it portion, and I I didn't like it because it was edited so weirdly, but I liked portions of it. So in my reread of Twilight, I remembered that Charlie, the dad, is actually a fantastic character and a really loving addition to Bella's family, and frankly I'm really glad he was there, even though it's really depressing how little he actually got to be in the plot. I remembered that I enjoyed the idea of the like lean, handsome vampire who is, you know, not allowed to do this, but he throws away the rules for her. Wasn't so into the I can read minds part because A, it didn't come up enough to be relevant, and it led to one of my most hated moments of Twilight, and that is the car scene. The scene where Bella is about to be attacked by a gang, dragged into an alley, and either murdered or something more awkward, and it's just Edward pulls up in his nice car and Bella's like, the heck, I'm in Seattle, why are you here? And he's just like, get in the car, Bella. And so she gets in the car, and it's right at the moment where she's finally decided that she knows herself is clumsy. She herself is clumsy. She knows that she can't run and that she has to fight. So she has this character moment where she's about to do something for herself that she has decided for the first time in the entire book, and then Edward steals it. And frankly, that was the moment where I started hating Edward, because before that I was like kind of on board. I was like, okay, cool, handsome dude is interesting and mysterious, and it wasn't really the bad boy thing because he didn't come off as a bad boy to me. It was just kind of that allure of the mysterious. But then when he steals her autonomy, which in at least a literary way, that's how it felt. That threw me off. And then he confesses that he's been like sneaking into her room, and that threw me off because no, you do not sneak into someone's room and watch them sleep. That is absolutely, utterly, totally disturbing. And 2, you're a vampire. You can't. Literally, a vampire is not able to go into a person's house unless they are invited. This is one of the main established facts of most vampire lores, except for the occasional, like the death harpy. She can just jump into people's houses and drink blood and essence off of young children and kill them in the night or whatever. But Edward was just, instead of being mysterious after that, he was just the creep who wouldn't let Bella have any self-development. And then that whole I'm too shiny for you moments where I was like, oh no, she's gonna get a sunburn off of his refracting chest. Oh my goodness. And I just laughed at the rest of the novel until the very end where it got super serious. And it just died. And because it died, I just had this burning resentment at the fact that all of the plot points that I cared about did not happen. So this is not Edward Cullen, this is Edmund. He is my character who basically makes fun of Edward, frankly, but he is a changeling, which is why all of his characteristics are there. He is a human who was raised in the realm of the Fae, and if he doesn't go back to the land of the Fae for too long, he starts craving blood, because changelings within my lore, and by studying a lot of the different legends, changelings are essentially people who have lost their souls, and so become bound to the realm of the Fae. So he is this close to being a void, a vampire, and if he gets too long without going home, he has a craving for blood, and thus the demonized thing is entertaining or to do, because if you have it established that they slowly lose their sanity over time because they don't have blood, and their eyes start doing the thing where their pupils basically enlarge as they get closer and closer to things that are edible. Instead of being full demonized, it is just full anime eyes, which I feel like treats the parody much better. He's a changeling, and when changelings get bloodthirsty, they look like anime protagonists, obviously, because why would they not? This was a completely logical leap. I'm pretty sure.
Ah, there you go. Look at him. He's so beautiful. You want to let him bite you.
But yeah. Edward is my both the most annoying and the saving grace of the Twilight franchise. Because, frankly, if you took him out and let events play out, it would play out differently, but at the same time, it would be actually a really interesting story. You would take out the whole stalker love element, which would be great, and instead you would have Bella slowly finding out that there's a coven of vampires in her area. Wait, is coven the right word for vampires? Probably not. Her best friend is a werewolf, and, well, childhood friend is a werewolf, and maybe, just maybe, the other boys at the school would have a chance with her, instead of her just being like, I'm too cool for you, and I'm too depressed.
Unless it's Edward, because Edward is everything. Look at him sparkle!
But frankly, I just can't. I just can't. Edward is annoying to me. But yeah, so Edmund is great. I like Edmund. He's fun to draw, and he's entertaining to figure out, because basically every time I draw him, I try to draw him as if he were on the front of a romance cover. So you've got to have like the rippling abs and the flowy white shirt, because he wears them 1 to 2 sizes too big for that effect, and he's just a joy to draw. But anyway, I feel like I've rambled on long enough. Let's just do a bit of a close-up here of these guys. There we go. Tia and Kai for science and for fun. And then Edmund, because who doesn't want a random protagonist who wants to be a romance cover? Alright, I'll do some more drawing. Thank you for watching, and maybe next time I will get to some pastel work on another project. See you guys.